All right, well, aloha, everybody. And thank you for all being here tonight. We're here with the Hawaii Farmers Union United, the speaker series. And I'm really really happy that we have such talent here tonight. I'm streaming from beautiful downtown Wailuku, and we have we're offering a few things tonight for everybody's pleasure. One is Drew Henmi, who is a Hoku Hano Hano Award nominee. But you know, the bottom line is he's a Aloha Aina musician. Just connects with the environment and his music, and it's really sweet to listen to. So we wanted to have Drew open up and then close the meeting too, after we have a presentation from Korean natural farming extraordinaire educator Chris Trump, who's with us tonight. And I had the fortune of spending a week with Chris when Master Cho came back in 2011, and several other people who were on this call were there for that week. Also Ricky Apana and Drake Weiner, and I expect other people to get on this call if they're not on now on here, but on Facebook Live to join in with tonight's presentation. So Chris is now on the mainland, and his farm is in Kohala, his family farm, macadamia nut farm, that is using Korean natural farming practices and completely changed the whole dynamics of that farm because of it. It was a conventional farm, and he can speak more to that, but it was a beautiful thing to see and hear of his transition into natural farming practices. So Chris is a wonderful educator. He has a plethora of YouTube videos up to educate folks on preparing these natural amendments, and we're fortunate to have them in the library, so to speak, of YouTube that you can tap into. I always like watching them myself. I always learn something new each time I watch him from Chris, because he's so articulate and really loves his work in that respect. So Drew, you want to get in here and play a few tunes? And there it is. He is. Aloha, Drew.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Will you introduce you and your compadre there, please?
Sure. Yeah. Come on up here.
And please tell me the name of your album, Drew. I listened to it on Facebook, and hey, how's it? Are you his brother or what? Looks like brother Matt.
It's come along over here.
All right.
Yeah. But yeah, so the name of my EP that came out, this was maybe about a year or two ago, is Finding My Way, which is up on Spotify, Apple Music, and such. But actually, just a few days ago on Friday, I put out a new single called Higher, which is also out on all the streaming platforms. So yeah, pretty excited about that, and super excited to be here with you all, and yeah, to hear you, Chris, speak. So yeah, thank you to both of the Vincents, and to all of you, and to Sasha for the connection. Oh, there we go.
Oh, nice. Wow, right on.
My Kumu's birthday today. He passed.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Alva Andrews.
Okay. Bless his heart.
Same.
Cool, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you again for having us all. And yeah, we're gonna play a few songs for you to get this thing started. So we're gonna get started, but if you guys, what's that?
The upright bass. Yeah, I was saying that really looks good, man. And I noticed you had some electric slide too in some of your pieces. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a harmonica player, so I might play a little bit with you tonight.
Okay. Jam along. Anyone, you want to sing along? You want to clap along? Feel free.
I'll be on mute, but I'll play over here listening.
Okay. There we go, Robert. I see you. You got your guitar. And Sasha, if you got a salt shaker, feel free to shake that thing too. Breathe in, breathe out. 'Cause even when I'm feeling doubts, there's no pressure. No, never. There's ups and progress can't spin in rounds. There's no pressure. No, never. Thank y'all very much. Appreciate that. So that was a tune called Breathe In. Actually working on a new EP now. That single I put out on Friday is kind of just the lead up to another collection of songs I'm hoping to put out in the next couple months. So that song is going to be on there. And yeah. Can y'all hear okay? Thumbs up if you can hear okay. Yeah, good, good, good. Perfect. 2 thumbs up, Sasha. Thank you. All right.
Chris, could you take maybe like a half foot, push your chair back half foot?
G, George. Me? Oh, who that? Chris?
Could you push your chair back half a foot? There you go. Yep, that's good.
Perfect. Okay.
get it right this time. We saw the sparks in flight, nothing but you and I, holding on through the night. I'm still falling, you're still calling. Falling, you're still calling. Yes, I'm still falling, you're calling. Falling, you're still calling. Oh, 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 yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, 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 yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, 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 yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah,
Thank you. That one's called Still Falling. Maybe on the next one, maybe. So yeah, I was just talking about, what was that?
Nice. Way to go, man.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So just talking about a single I just put out last Friday called Higher. So yeah, figure play that. I think maybe that was how Sasha might have seen. Shortly after I plugged that, I think he reached out. So thank you. Appreciate it.
And I was out at sea, and I was looking for a light. Thought I was free when there was nothing wrong for miles. Now that I see the shores, I'm looking for a place to hold me. And covered from the storms, the next chapter of the story. Yes, I'm climbing higher, so I see a different view. Where the air is lighter, this fire is burning blue. Below my feet, the ground beneath supports me. I'm looking to the east, a new dawn I see approaching. Yes, I'm climbing higher, so I see a different view. Where the air is lighter, this fire is burning blue. But I know I gotta do the work to find out what it's worth. So I go what it's all about, to cast away my doubt. Yes, I'm climbing high, so I see a different view. Where the hair is lighter, its fire is burning blue. Yes, I'm climbing higher, so I see a different view. Where the air is lighter, its fire is burning blue. This fire is burning blue. Yes, I see a different view. Yes, I see a different view.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, that's a brand spanking new one out there on the.
Wow, congratulations. That's great, man. Sounds really great.
Thank you.
And that just came out this past Friday.
This is past Friday, yeah.
And where can folks download that?
They can, yeah, Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, yeah, anywhere online. You can check my social media as well. I think that was in the post or the email that went out. So
It's all kind of changed, yeah, with music, with all these platforms, yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it's very different. I mean, don't get me, it's great playing for you all, but it's definitely very different, you know?
Yes.
But nonetheless, I mean, we're so appreciative to even have these opportunities to play. So yeah, thank you all for spending some time with us this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you guys, do you guys want to do one more tune, and then can you come back at the end?
Sure.
After Chris's talks, you want to play some more music? You're
Yeah,
folks
that's great.
do that, it'd be great.
Okay. Let's do. What do you want to do? Let's do Garden.
Sure.
Okay, so this was actually a cover tune about or from an artist named Gregory Alan Isakov, and he wrote this song called Garden. And so we figured, since we're talking to the
Appropriate.
then we might as well play that. So this was called Garden.
Bury me in your garden.
All right. Thank you all. We'll see y'all in a little bit. Really excited to hear Chris speak. So yeah.
Thanks, Drew. Appreciate it, man. Really well done.
All right.
Both you guys. Mahalo nui.
Mahalo.
Okay, everybody. So back in 2011, I had the fortune of spending a week with Master Cho. And in that week, I was on the Big Island in Kohala. And that week, a person who else is on this, couple people who else are on this call right now, Drake Weinart, Ricky Apana, and myself, and Chris Trump stayed at this center there in Kohala for a week, and all we did was make natural farming amendments and be able to compare. We had Master Cho had us breaking up in groups and made the amendments, and the daughter came and critiqued each one and how it was made, and it was really a fascinating week spent together. And so Chris has just skyrocketed in the not only of the making the amendments, but also applying them to his farm, changing a conventional farm, macadamia nut farm, into an organic macadamia nut farm, using Korean natural farming practices. Even, and I'd like them to speak to this tonight, he even did a trial around on one side of the fence post, treating fireweed to where it pretty much took the general vitality of the fireweed away. And on the other side of the fence post, it was still vital, so really doing some cutting edge experiments like that. And then also doing these great YouTube videos. I would highly recommend that tonight you just absorb all that he's talking to you about. Don't feel you have to write everything down or anything, because you just go to his YouTube videos and really glean a lot from that too. So without further ado, I'd like to just please give a warm welcome to our brother, Chris Trump. All right, Chris, welcome, man.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Yeah, that was a sweet time. And Drew, that was wonderful. The music, that was special. Makes me miss being in Hawaii and just hearing somebody bust out ukulele and go for it. So thank you for sharing that. Can't do it right now because I live in the country and I'll mess with my internet power, but I'm definitely gonna get that EP that you put on there. That's great stuff, man. Thank you. Yeah, Vincent, it's been a while since then, and I'm so grateful for that time. I think my natural farming journey and the journey on our farm and just everything I've been able to do since then, I think is painted with gratitude. That class that we took was in my hometown, little tiny town of Hawai'i, and so for that to kind of show up at my doorstep at the right time for us as farmers was pretty special. And David Fuertes is in Kohala, is a long time Future Farmers of America educator, and he played a big role in making that happen and different things, bringing education to Kohala. So we've benefited as a farm, as a family farm, a great deal from just real gifts. So yeah, that was a sweet time. We had a lot of fun. Vincent, I think got smacked by Master Cho more than anybody, though.
Chris, could you please share a little bit about your family? I know you're a father of 5, right? 5 or 6?
5 kids.
5,
here.
okay.
Yeah, we live. I had to stand up listening to the music. I stood up, stepped outside. It's a beautiful moon. I'm here in Boise, Idaho area, and yeah, and just the Pueo flew over the moon as I was listening to Brother Drew jam. So it's a
Nice.
beautiful night here. I'm a little behind you guys, or ahead of you guys on time, but yeah, my kids are doing great. Our family, we live in the country and are loving it, building a tree house and doing the summertime stuff. So yeah, my oldest is 11, my youngest is 4, so we got 5 all tucked in between them. So yeah, it's good times here. I was on the
Beautiful.
tractor today for about 5 hours helping a local farmer. They're going to do grass hay farming, and they want to do organic grass hay and real high quality. So we did soil labs on their land before we started, and then we're making them for a 20-acre parcel. We're making them 20 tons of IMO4. And so I was mining their farm soil for that, got it piled up next to their IMO3 that we just finished. And so that's, I don't know, it's really, really a fun thing to be able to do. So them as farmers will put down this indigenous microorganism from this local area on their land, and then seed and water. And then they'll be making teas with the IMO4 and putting in some nutrients through their watering system. So that's
Wow.
going to be their whole feeding program for their crop. And yeah, really cool.
Chris, could you please, I know, we're really envious that you get to have such access to mill run of wheat there on the mainland. They took the mill away from us here in Hawaii. So I know, can you just explain to folks about what you're talking about relating to, for those who aren't quite akamai to IMO3 and IMO4 and how you get to that place? And that would be great.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's neat because there's grains all over the world, and specifically, I'll start backwards. Specifically speaking to carbohydrate for IMO, I'll explain it first. So, Vincent, you were saying you just did an IMO 1 and 2 there, getting ready for stuff on your farm, and
Yes.
IMO 1 is I think that IMO 1 and 2 is really the beauty or the most special part of natural farming, because it's enabling a farmer to have access to cultivate the microbial life and diversity that's existing near or around their farm or up in the hills away from their farm, but still indigenous in that it loves your temperature, your rainfall, your barometric pressure even. And so these are the organisms that kind of cultivate or turn the wheel of the soil food web, kind of make nutrients available to plants and create relationships with your plant roots and protect your plants from pathogenic growth of microorganisms. So going out into the forest and finding stuff like this. Let's see if we can't screen share. I'll show you. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is, I was in Myanmar and teaching coffee farmers there how to find their indigenous fungi and cultivate it for use on their farm. But you're going out and you're really focusing on the fungal life as far as what you're visually selecting, because that's something we can see with our naked eye. And when it's big and you can see those individual strands with the naked eye, we know it's not a pathogen. So these are big beneficial fungi. Most of the disease-causing fungi are 1 micrometer or smaller, which we can't differentiate with our naked eye. We can't see that as an individual strand. We see it about 4 micrometers or larger. So these are beneficial fungi that we're going out, we're selecting, and then we're selecting what placing these collection boxes of rice in their environment. So we're getting also the yeast and bacteria that work symbiotically with these big beneficial fungi, and we're using that as farmers to amend our soil to increase the overall health and life, and really we're getting our soil minerals mined by these microbes, and they work overtime, they work all the time. So as a farmer, having that life that's cycling nutrients and bringing in that the nitrogen as well as the minerals found in the sandfield and clay, it's a real special thing. So then we take that we've cultivated on rice, it blooms on the rice, then we move that in with sugar, and that's our second stage of IMO2, or our second stage of IMO, that's IMO2. And that kind of puts them all on cryo freeze, to borrow a sci-fi term, where they go dormant. The fungi will sporulate because of the lack of water. And so it says, I'm in a desert, I need to go dormant and wait to be reintroduced to water. And that enables a farmer to have a shelf-stable inoculum from his farm for his farm with indigenous microorganisms, which is a really special thing, and not something you can buy at the store, because it's fairly perishable, you know, and who's going to go collect your organisms for your area and put them on the shelf for that tiny little market that you would be. And so it's just this really special thing. And then we grow that out. So I only need a few handfuls, even for this 10,000 pound pile of IMO3, I only need a few handfuls of IMO2, and then I brew it in water if I'm doing a big pile. Otherwise, you just mix it in some water. And you grow it out on a grain and a carbon source, so something like wood chips. In Korea, they use rice straw, and this causes those microbes with some moisture and some nutrients to kind of go ballistic. They take over your carbon and carbohydrate, and you have this huge amount of this indigenous microbial life. And then you mingle that in the fourth stage, you mingle that with your local soil. And that's kind of, it's like holding a bit of a social gathering where you're introducing, hey, local microbes and larger microbes of the soil meet this huge amount of yeast, bacteria, fungi, etc. And everybody learn to play nice as we turn you in perfect, you know, moisture conditions, lots of food, and then when we apply it to the soil, we can even apply it on growing plants. And because it's been mingled in that way with your local soil or your farm soil, there's no shock or kind of settling time where you're going to get some pull down or some kind of slow down in your crop, which is a big deal if you're trying to apply it onto a perennial or something you want to get produce from that year. So yeah, it's that whole process. There's like Vincent said, there's a bunch of information on YouTube, and Drake, who's on here right now, he has naturalfarminghawaii.net, a bunch of information on there, and then CTAR put out a bunch of information, PDFs and stuff, and just kind of sorting through the plethora of information there is. You kind of, the best teacher, even with all that information, is going to be doing it, playing with it, learning what it smells like when it's right, and why it went wrong if it went wrong. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it is a little bit like learning guitar. You know, you can be really into it and really gung ho, but you still kind of got to put in the work of getting the blisters or getting the calluses and learning where the chords are. And it's like baking or anything, you know. So that's probably the hardest part for farmers, is that there's a learning curve. When you're, you know, the goal is to make an income from your farm, that can be really challenging to, you know, take time out to kind of learn a process. So I see that as one of the biggest hindrances. And so that's one of the reasons, just kind of in that gratitude, that I did some information sharing and continue to. It's a lot of fun. That's you know, just like Drew's music, that connection, that kind of that peaceful place that comes with connection to the land and enjoying the time outside is natural farming's right in there, you know, where you're just doing this wonderful thing. I was just down on a farm I'm helping in Colorado, and they're doing really well. really stoked. They're just using natural farming, and but you're spraying liquid IMO on the crop, and it's, you know, you're getting all covered in it, and you're like, oh, this is actually probably really good for me.
Yeah, right.
Or a little bit, you know. But no, it's been a fun journey. We started out in trialing on our farm around 2011, around the time of that class that Vincent mentioned, and we started out pretty skeptical as farmers. You know, it sounded really good. I was excited about the concepts, and we had been looking for something to kind of partner with how nature did it, because we saw some things on our farm that caused us to start asking those questions. And we did a 14 tree trial, and it seemed to go really well. We had some kind of struggling trees in that 14 tree trial, and they went through a process of recovery over 3 years, and by year 3 they were back in full production and really healthy. But in that process, we scaled up to 5 acres and then a 50-acre trial, and then we ran a 144-acre trial for about 4 years. And after that, we looked at it and said, this is a viable way to farm, and we chose to move forward with that kind of natural farming nutrient program and microorganisms as kind of our staple, or our main kind of driver of the production of the farm. So that is in North Kohala. I was born in Honoka'a on the Big Island, and my dad moved to North Kohala about 34 years ago, and we've been farming macadamia nuts as a family for about 30 years now. And yeah, it started with a bit of a need to be more healthy financially. My dad's kind of philosophy in farming was that we were in it for the community, and so we sought to pay a really good wage, a living wage, and we live in a small town, kind of country town on the Big Island, and we paid good benefits, and we didn't want to change that, and we were struggling, in different years, struggling financially. And so the kind of conversation was, we need to do macadamia nuts kind of 20% better. And that, easier said than done. But I think with natural farming, we're knocking on that door, and we're really seeing some. It's not like everything exploded and we doubled overnight. It's this steady increase in health and steady maintaining of productivity, while at the same time living on an island where I think in 2012, I might be a little late. It might be more. No, it's probably more like 2010. Our fertilizer costs doubled. Or no, not double. They went up 400%. There was a spike in oil, and so we increased the price tag for the same amount of fertilizer, quadrupled, and then we were also having to pay to get it shipped there, which had gone up because of the oil prices. And that was a pretty big hit for us with conventional agriculture. And so as it is now, we produce nearly everything we are feeding our trees with on our farm, and we're using our byproducts, and yeah, it feels like a pretty special way to farm. We're pretty grateful for that ability to do that, just because of a little bit of knowledge.
What a beautiful thing, yeah, Chris, to as a farmer, lowering our inputs. I mean, that's definitely a big issue, and so happy to hear that that's what you're providing on your farm. Now I see Jim Trump on this call. Is that a relative?
Yeah, that's my dad.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Trump. So happy you're here. Thank you for being open to all that Chris has brought forward, and it's a wonderful thing, you know, beautiful thing. So thank you for being here, sir. So,
Thank you.
Chris, did you have any other slides you want to share?
Yeah, I can share slides and talk about it. You know, somewhere along the line, Vincent, you know, this was started out and was a lot of work to figure out how to scale it for 750 acres. Do you remember when we learned? We were talking
Right.
about wheelbarrow size batches and CCs in droppers, and
Right.
I'm thinking, okay, how does that translate to 750 acres? So that was a huge journey to kind of figure out scaling, and a fun one. And I, somewhere along the line in that, I really came to believe that we could have kind of positive change or systemic change in our agricultural system through some of this technology and regenerative technology in general. I'm a natural farmer. I use this method or this system, but there's a lot of ways to partner with nature, and there's a lot of really good technology to do that. But yeah, I'll share some slides.
Great.
So one of the things that's been probably the most life-giving for me with this natural farming journey is to work in the third world with farmers. Just the kind of impact it has on communities there is just so instantly evident. So this is, I don't think the video is going to work very well just because I'm in the country with country internet, but this is a group I was just with in the beginning of the year in Myanmar, and these are some of the women farmers in the area. There's one dude in there helping them, but this was a huge community of coffee farmers that this group works with, that I kind of partnered with to teach, and they've taken this. They were so receptive, and then have taken it and are kind of fully implementing it in 1,000 farmer community up in the really poor mountainous region in northern Myanmar, and just so special because this knowledge, it applies, it works. Can you guys see some of the video? It's probably a bit choppy, but
Yeah,
yes,
it's a
we're just
little
teaching them.
choppy. It's Chris, what are they adding? It looks in
So
their
this
world.
is we taught them a bunch of natural farming techniques, and then what this is we're teaching them to use their kind of farm byproducts, so coffee cherry,
Oh, cherry. Okay.
straw. They have some water buffalo manure, and teaching them just basic composting. But then we have that IMO4 to be able to add to it and jumpstart their composting. And so they had a system. They got a grant to build these. I don't have a picture of it ready, but they got a grant to build these raised beds that will act as coffee drying racks for their drying season when they're harvesting. But then they remove that top rack in the off season, and they're filling it with compost that they're making with their cherry, and able to produce a crop in the kind of off season of coffee in all these raised beds, because they need like 200 raised beds for drying, and then now they have a function for the rest of the year. So it's really fun project, but I think that for me kind of helps bring the concepts full circle in kind of our agricultural export as a country. It just feels like it feels like a real positive effect. All right, so I'll run through this somewhat quickly because I prefer the conversation, but I think it's also helpful to have some visuals. So in natural farming, the idea or kind of where we end up focusing is in the soil life. because we come to understand that it has such impact on our yields and quality of produce. And so this is rough translation of how they'd say it in Korea, that the plant above ground represents the life below ground. And yeah, so we're out kind of cultivating the fungal life. You'll hear me talk a lot about fungi because in Korean natural farming, the bacteria and the yeast is so easy. Kind of the rest of the system, when you take care of or cultivate indigenous fungi into your agricultural systems, the rest of it comes so easily. So, but the fungi is a little more delicate as far as cultivation. So we do kind of focus on that, because if we can get that to thrive, everything else does too. This is a fungal on the bottom right there. It's a fungal spore head sporulating. And so this is kind of what we're cultivating when we're doing IMO3. They're constantly blooming out in these big, long, kind of bamboo-looking bodies. And then when they get hot, they sporulate and they make these seeds. And that's them sending their nucleus into a seed head. And so by the time we're done making IMO3 and then IMO4, we have this pile of material that's solid marbles, those little circles there. Our IMO4 is basically fungi seeds. When we're finished, if you look at it under a microscope, it just looks like a giant bag of marbles when it dries out. And what that does is when you put it onto your farmland and you water it in, each one of those can wake up into a fungal body. And because they're indigenous, they like your soil, they like your temperature, they begin to thrive in your farmland, and they self-perpetuate year after year. You're not having to continually put something on to get that life. That life is constantly going. And that's just the wonder of kind of cultivating your indigenous life. So I'm gonna skip through this. These are some papers that just kind of show the peer review studies that show the efficacy of plant yield and overall plant health increasing as a result of good, diverse microbial activity in the soil. All right, here's a little analogy for people maybe that this is a new concept. You have 1 trillion microbes in your body, and we don't have blades in our guts to digest our food. We rely on our human biome or gut biota to digest our food and make our nutrients available to us. ADP, ATP are the things that pass through our intestinal wall and we use for energy. We get those because we have a healthy microbial system in our gut. Well, plants eat in much the same way. They're just like us. If somebody doesn't have good microbial diversity in their gut, they're sick and they need kind of intervention or an up of that microbial life. Plants are the same way, but their gut or the inside of their intestines is the soil right around their roots. A lot like ours. In nature, we see this kind of mirroring of humans and plants. Even though we're so different, there's a lot of the ways, the laws of how nature works are very similar. So here I'm going to jump into something really weird. But in the medical world, in the human medical world, if somebody is sick because they don't have good, healthy gut bacteria or microbial life, they'll take a piece of the inside of somebody's digestive tract, and they'll transplant it into the unhealthy person. And what happens is right away they get a healthy gut culture of microbial life, and they're able to process food and eat well. That's all it takes. It's this really simple transfer. And so that is widely accepted and common practice in the medical community. And what we're talking about in natural farming is doing that for our cropland. So we go out to this healthy, thriving zone of untouched nature, you know, where they've had hundreds or 1,000 years to kind of find a balance of diversity. And we establish that on our farmland, and we benefit from just that life that happens in nature and is provided by nature. Yeah, IMO, this is an IMO 3. IMO is the soil kind of fecal matter transplant, if you will. That's I'll stop using that term now, but just to help us kind of conceptualize what it is, why we're taking this kind of strange looking microbial life and putting it in our farmland. And it's because typically a lot of agricultural processes cause the microbial diversity to fall off or be depleted over time. And so this is a way to steward that microbial diversity. This is an IMO 3 from our farm. So just the arrow there to show that that fungal life that we're cultivating, and then this idea of fungal to bacterial ratio. And so that's it's just the IMO process. The IMO process kind of gears you to have this good result. But with this material applied to your farmland, you're going to increase your fungal life, and most of your crops, at very least, like a 1-to-1 fungal to bacterial ratio. And often farmland has a very small amount of fungi. So having a tool to be able to reintroduce or increase that fungal life in your soil is such a wonderful and special thing.
Hey, Chris, could you speak a little bit to the difference between fungal dominated and bacterial dominated soil as far as different crops?
Yeah, this is probably a good time to talk about that fireweed trial you mentioned too. Yeah, a lot of our crops that we grow like a balanced soil, and for us as tree farmers, we actually like somewhere between a 30 to 1,000-to-1 fungal to bacterial ratio. We really need that fungi because of how trees eat and how they do their processes in their root zone. But what can happen if you have imbalanced soil, fungal to bacterial balance, is that you can have anemic or struggling crops, not because there's any nutrition problem. You can have perfect soil as far as you got all your miners in there and you got your plenty of nitrogen and etc. But with imbalanced soil, you can actually still have your plants, your crops struggling to eat, because they rely on these connections in their root zone to do their processes, but also to mine a lot of the minor minerals they need. So yeah, it's a huge thing. And we were transitioning some of our conventional over to natural farming. We were kind of in that process of looking at it, but we still had about 400 conventional acres. And I was walking through that, or on a tractor, I don't remember what, and I was looking, and we were using herbicide. It saves us a ton of money and man hours in being able to herbicide a strip where the nuts fall, so that we could harvest out of grass or kind of right off the soil. We don't do that anymore. We are organic now, but that was a tool for us. But I watched, and in these herbicide strips, the first thing to pop up was fireweed. Everything would die, and the first thing, and the thing that would be thriving, was the fireweed. And looking at that soil, what happens with the herbicide is it takes out the fungal community. And so the fireweed was thriving in this highly bacterially imbalanced soil. And so we had a friend, a good friend of our family, asked for some help with his pasture land, and Dad let me rent some tractors. We don't, nobody gets to just take tractors out of the yard. I rented some tractors, and we did IMO 4 for his 2 acres. He hobby ranches, he gets some cattle as wean offs, raises them, and he was no longer able to ranch like he'd wanted to with his cattle, and because of a lack of grass production, but also because he had all this fireweed just going crazy. And so he called us up with kind of an emergency. One of his cows was down. It wasn't eating, and typically that fireweed poisoning, the cows die from that. So we took over a big old kind of cattle syringe of LAB without the needle, and we just pushed that down the cow's throat. It was up the next day. It ate and went to market. It just kind of helped them deal with that process and deal with the toxins in their gut.
And Chris, could you tell them what the LAB is, please?
Yeah, and you were making some of that today,
Yep.
weren't you, Vincent?
Yep.
Yeah, so LAB is also, there's a YouTube video on it. It's lactic acid bacteria. Back to talking about our gut, about 70% of those trillion microbes in the human body are the lactic acid bacteria type microbe, or lactobacilli type microbe. And those are really important in nature. They're called a facultative anaerobe. They can thrive in aerobic or anaerobic conditions. But just a kind of a superstar in the microbial world, and really important for human and animal digestion. So we push that down the cow's throat because it's such a digestive aid. And that worked out for that one cow, but he still had this real pasture problem. And so we did IMO, and we seeded with some grass, but we didn't touch the fireweed. We sprayed with some liquid IMO following up the solid IMO application. And then I just watched, and in 3 months' time, all the fireweed got powdery mildew or predated by what are those little bugs? I was just dealing with them and call aphids. So they were totally taken out by disease and pests, because we balanced the fungal to bacterial ratio in the soil. We got that fungal life up. And I have labs before and after of their soil, and there was a huge change, and that fungal number came up. And so all of a sudden, this fireweed can no longer live because it thrives on or lives in bacterially dominated soil. And a lot of our weeds or early successional plants are the same way. Balance the soil, and all of a sudden they can't thrive there. And so it's really neat over a 3-year period to watch the land change using this technology.
Chris,
so Mike DuPont. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just sorry. I just wondered, have you done any trials with nutgrass?
I haven't. No. That was kind of my only pasture land trial. I have seen here in Idaho, I've seen different weeds get totally trashed by balancing the fungal life in the soil. One of them is morning glory. Morning glory is a terrible weed on the mainland, and the morning glory, where we're a couple years into the natural farming on a farm I was managing here in Boise, is it gets powdery mildew as soon as it springs up. And so it's still there, but it's not thriving, and it has a whole, it's knocked back. And so that's really fun. It's fun to watch those just dynamics in nature.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great.
Mike DuPont came out to that fireweed trial, and he watched it, and he's really excited. It's actually why I'm going back partly to we had some hiccups with a fireweed trial we were doing just to replicate that. And so I'm going to go back and we're going to complete that replication to be able to put it out to the ranchers so they understand the information.
Yeah, because these the county's spending a lot of money nuking the fireweed and it doesn't do anything, just comes
Right.
back with a vengeance. And so yeah, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do that. I noticed in your collection box, could you speak a little bit about the wood you're using here and what they're seeing?
Yeah. So I use cedar wood to put the rice in to collect the indigenous microbes because it lasts. It's if I'm gonna make the tool and I'm gonna take the time to make it really nice, I don't want to have to make it every year. And there's so much fungal life going on here that if I use pine, it kind of falls apart after a couple years of use. Whereas these boxes, you make them once and they stay. And bacteria doesn't live on cedar. It can't kind of thrive and do its thing on cedar. So when I go to use it again, it's not full of a bunch of life that I don't want.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's great.
This is a trial. I'm gonna just breeze through this. This is a trial by Kun Hui Wang through University of Hawaii Manoa, and I think it was paid for by EM. And so I'm sorry they might not have got the results they wanted. But she did indigenous microorganisms, some EM, and then Mycos, Agrigrow, and Sumagrow. What's interesting to note is that they did 25 and 50% standard fertilizer rates for all the side-by-sides except for IMO. There was no fertilizer used for IMO. And so standard grower practices, 100% micronutrient, 100% fertilizer. They did a control of no treatment, IMO with a foliar nutrient, no fertilizer, EM with a 50% fertilizer, etc. So we'll cruise through this. So this is plant height. IMO was up there above the rest. Total fruit weight, which a farmer's going to care about the most probably. IMO beat out the rest in this side by side. Total plant biomass, the standard grower was slightly more in plant biomass, but not more in the fruit. So you got a little bit bigger plant, but not necessarily more marketable fruit. Yeah. And,
Chris, one of the trials we did with taro using conventional amendments and then IMO, the taro, conventional taro came out bigger than the KNF taro. But what I did was I let it sit out for 2 weeks, and the weight of the conventional dropped down to where the KNF held its own. So in the salt fertilizers, I guess it just absorbs a lot more water, it was water weight more than anything. But as soon as that water weight went away, it basically, the KNF rivaled it was 2020 that the farmer used on it,
wow,
which is
very
pretty
cool.
expensive, but it was really neat to see that. I was a little disappointed that the KNF didn't have the size that the conventional did, but then once I let it sit for a couple of weeks and it shrunk down, I was like, oh my God, the KNF rivaled it in weight. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things in these trials to look at too. One of the things that we typically don't do in university trials is kind of a cost efficacy. What is the cost of farming this way versus this way? Here's our fruit yields. Here's what we could sell it for. What did we spend to get that fruit yield? And so when people ask me, how much, what does it compare to conventional? And my answer currently is it's about the same. You can yield about the same, but we're spending less on fertilizer. So our total costs are the same. We increase costs of having to mow on our land. So we have another job another mower mowing pretty much all year round. But we're maintaining yields, or we're keeping those yields up, and our cost of fertilizer costs have dropped significantly. And so
Hey, Chris?
I think, yeah,
Excuse me a second. There's a couple questions that are coming on Facebook Live I wanted to bring forward. A friend of ours here plants a lot of indigenous flora, a lot of koas and alali'i, and all the different Hawaiian indigenous plants. And he says the potential risk of inadvertently spreading unfavorable pathogens you'd be concerned about. For example, in the Big Island, there's so much rapid ohia death, and I know you were addressing that with the university back in the day. And ceratosisis flying through the air. He said IMO rice collections could be a vector for ROD, question mark. Has anyone utilizing KNF on the Big Island tried testing IMO 1 for ROD?
yeah, and that's kind of the paradigm shift, or kind of the crossroads we find ourselves at, is isolation. I was talking to Lisa Keith, who is she? She's a governmental kind of federal plant pathologist. She's one of the leading federal plant pathologists, and she was out in the Big Island to look at ROD and kind of talk through it and come up with a solution. And one of the things that we currently use to study microbial life in the university systems are isolation. We isolate a disease, we study it in isolation. The problem with that is that nature doesn't work like that. It's not one thing, it's things in community. And so my theory, my 2 cents or hypothesis or input on ROD is, I believe it's a type of Phytophthora or root-borne fungal disease that gets up into the cambium layer of the tree, and it's parasitic, and so it steals from the tree and the tree declines. We have something similar in macadamia nuts, macadamia quick decline, macadamia slow decline. My hypothesis, or kind of my observations on what's happened on our farm, is I believe that by diverse and an abundance of diversity of fungal life, that these pathogens, specifically Phytophthora, are outcompeted by the better rent payer, if you will, in the plants or the tree's root zone. So the tree will create relationships with whoever's there to try seeking nutrients. But in a bit of a void, or where we've had a die-off of microbial diversity, and it could be due to an environmental condition, even like the volcano, and some of the ash and the composition of that going onto the soil. In a bit of a vacuum, ROD or these pathogens like Phytophthora thrive. They're going to be the one making the relationships. They can multiply like crazy, but they're parasitic. They end up killing their host. Whereas if you have diversity there, nature's diversity, just large fungal life, the tree makes better relationships. It's able to fend off against pathogens. And so the answer isn't sterilize and keep all the microbes out that are bad, as much as in my opinion, it is get diversity there, thriving soil food web, thriving microbial diversity, with all your indigenous fungi that kept all that in check for generations. That's the solution. However, because in studying these things, we're still on an isolation path, we haven't and it's not really at any fault of the university system or any scientific community. And I don't mean to sound like that. We simply don't have the computing power in the entire world to map the interconnectivity in an inch of soil. We can't, in all the supercomputers, we can't make sense of how microbes work in community. As a scientific community, we simply don't understand that yet. And so we look at these microbes, we see they have a value, and this, lactic acid bacteria does these things, but how a fungi and a bacteria work in a soil system symbiotically, we're pretty much in the dark. I've stared at big fungal bodies, and there's a super highway of bacteria going through the tube of the fungal body, doing something, and we don't even know what that is that they're doing. But obviously they work in conjunction. And I think the problem with ROD is that we've had some environmental impacts that have caused a die-off of some of our indigenous diversity. One of the places on the Big Island that I collect IOMO one, I don't hurt the environment, but I just go up and put the box, is in this beautiful ohia grove on the top of the Kohala Mountains. And it was never in ag cultivation. It has been pastured, but it was never in cane. And so these ohia are just beautiful. And I think that diversity found there in that soil would be more the answer, even if ROD was present, because it's not expressing in the trees. And so
Beautiful.
that's kind of, that's my input on that.
It's really beautiful. So there's two things that come to mind, and I know we need to kind of wrap this up, but a couple of things that come to mind is Fantastic Fungi, the movie, can help people better understand, that whole piece. And then also 60 Minutes just did an expose this past Sunday on the microbiome in the gut, and the founder of the microbiome, and they were talking about how probiotics, do they really work? And it was interesting, the studies that are going on in that respect. So I just really would like to applaud you, brother, for being here tonight with us and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience. I know we're just scratching the surface, but like I said earlier, folks can get on YouTube and just really learn from you a lot, as I continue to do, Chris. So thank you so much. And Mr. Trump, thank you for being on the call, sir. I'm going to be in
wait. We've got a couple questions real quick.
Oh, okay.
We've got 2 more minutes. Chris, Alan's got a question. How do you select beneficial versus pathogenic microbes? What conditions work in Hawaii? Soil pH, moisture?
Great question. So we are not so concerned with the pathogens. And I know that please understand that that's not coming from I don't care, or I don't care to pay attention to that, or we're going willy-nilly. It's back to kind of some of the philosophy I was talking about as far as microbes and community. But when you go out to collect, what you're looking for is fungi that you can see the individual strand with your naked eye. And what that means, if you can see that individual strand with your naked eye, it means that it's at least 4 micrometers in size. So that 4 micrometer size is actually a scientific tool, or kind of a law, loose law, but a law you can rely on, that that big size fungi is actually a beneficial, because most of your disease causing fungi are small. There's one giant fungi that lives in Pacific Northwest, kind of where I am right now, and I've identified that and found it in nature, and that is considered, could express itself as a hurtful to some trees, potentially, but generally speaking, especially, and in Hawaii, you don't have that large fungi, which is kind of the exception, and it's huge. I mean, it's like ropes. But generally speaking, if you're seeing an individual strand, you're looking at a beneficial, large hyphal diameter fungi, and that's positive all day long on your farmland. So that's a really simple answer to, I know, a big question, and we could get into that more, but that's really, if you get that diversity established, you're gonna see that you're not dealing with bacterial wilts or fungal diseases in the same way you were, just because those large communities of diversity are going to keep that in check.
Chris, when you were talking about, when you were talking about the fireweed and the herbicides, Mary is asking, was the herbicide you were using Roundup?
Yeah. When we were doing conventional ag, we were using Roundup. Yeah. So that the glyphosate kind of reduces. It does a bunch of things, but it reduces oxygen transfer into the soil, and in the top 4 inches, a lot of your big aerobic fungi live, and if you suffocate them, you have a die-off in that community.
Okay, and then her last question was, when you sell organic macadamia nuts, do you go through the usual process of selling that?
Yeah, we sell to a processor currently. We may have a product with our name on it and a little of our story before too long here, but we sell to a processor, and I think currently you can find them at Costco in Hawaii. It's the only organic macadamia nut you're going to find there. So
all right, wonderful. Well, Chris, thank you so much. And Jim Trump, thank you so much for being on the call and doing what you're doing on the Big Island there. I'll be in your neck of the woods on the 9th through the 12th, and doing strategic planning over there with our organization. I'd like to encourage everybody on the call to become a member of Hawaii Farmers Union United. You can go to our website, hfuu.org, and we'll be continuing to hold these forums. But Chris, it was an honor and a pleasure to have you on tonight, man. All the best to you and your family. And we'll, go Ricky Apana giving you a big thumbs up, and Drake, I know, is on the call, fellow IMO foes. And so you take good care, okay? And we're gonna bring Drew back on here and his brother to play some music to take us out. So take it away, you guys.
All right. Yeah, well, before we get started, I mean, Chris, that was super enlightening. For me as a layman, I learned a lot. That was crazy. This one is called Shine Your Light. It's going to be another song that's off of my forthcoming EP. Actually, real quick before I get started, just wanted to, so this single on the left here, that's what just came out. And if you want to, stay tuned for that EP and any other stuff, you can check out social media, website, so on and so forth. So yeah, but yeah, thank you again so much for having us, and we'll play a few tunes to take us out. One, two, three, four.
Follow your brown dream, she said to me, on what's inside. There's plenty in this world for you to see. Let your heart be your own guide. And you shine the light on this world's dark, dark night. Shine your light. Shine your light. These things you'll need to learn, they'll come in time. It'll be alright. endless valleys and mountains lie, but you can reach no heights. And you shine light on this world's dark, dark night. You shine your light. You shine your light. You shine your light. You shine your light. Yes, you can guide the light inside the lantern of your mind on this world, on this world, dark, dark night. Yes, you shine the light on this world, dark, dark night. Yes, you shine the light on this world, dark, dark night. You shine your light. You shine your light. You shine your light. You shine your light.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah, baby.
Did I hear a harmonica?
Yeah.
Wait, let's put this grid.
Yeah, a little bit, little bit.
Where'd that harmonica come from?
Yeah, baby.
I like it. Hey. All right. And we got a guitar in the house. We got a harmonica in the house.
How do you
Yeah,
get
baby.
that sharp? That's pretty great.
Let's see. So we got time for a couple more?
Sure.
Or one more, two more?
Yeah,
One,
yeah.
Couple more. Still on this end.
Sweet little baby, the one that asks somebody cries, 'cause I keep stepping inside of another question. Who am I? Let the sweet sounds cry. Running myself all the way to perception. Something I don't ever wanna feel is any way. 'Cause my mama said, go ahead and say, could you meet me on a rainy day? Could you meet me on a sunny day? 'Cause girl, could you meet me? Could you meet me halfway? A wise man never told me. You never told me what to say. Girl, no, I wait. Girl, going insane.
Woohoo! All right. All right. Hano ho, hano ho.
Okay.
One more. You got one more?
Thank you again so much for having us, and thank you for all that you do for Hawaii and our ability to be resilient, sustainable, and self-sustenance. So yeah, big mahalo to you guys.
Thank you, guys.
This one is called Finding My Way. It's a single off of my first EP that came out. So
That's the first song I heard of yours, so I'm glad you're playing it.
all right.
I've been trying to find a way to your heart. When the moon comes out and lights are up with the stars, I can find my way to you. I can see where I want to go. So, finding my way to you. Finding my way to you. Oh, cut the brush and clear the way. 'Cause inside there's a path that leads to every place. Be my guide. We can go where we want to. Together. We can fly up above it all. This is true. Finding my way to you. 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 Never thought I'd fall again. Just didn't see the clear weather. Wasn't looking but I found a friend. Finding my way to you. Finding my way to you. Finding my way to you. Finding my way to you.
Thank you all again so much. Really.
All right, Drew. Thank you, man.
All
Good
right.
fun. Good fun.
Thanks for having us.
So you got to come to our convention and we'll jam, okay?
Absolutely. When is it?
It's going to be in November and probably on Maui again. So we'll have to hook up. We'll be in touch.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna send you. I'll get through Vince. I'll send her Sasha my phone number, contact information, and great music, you guys. Really wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing that light to sandwich the beautiful presentation Chris brought to us tonight. And this is special stuff. You know, there should have been 150 people on this call tonight. I think Facebook Live had a bunch too. So that's wonderful. Thank you again, everybody. Please support your local agriculture. And thank you again for being on the call tonight. Chris, love to you, brother. All the best. Aloha, everybody. Everybody that's on the call. Thank you for being on the call.
Mahalo. Aloha.
Test negative, be positive.